Good afternoon, good morning, good something.
Hello.
Hello,
Welcome,
hello.
welcome, one and all, to another Humpday Q&A.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, it's better. Now we're facing each other, right? How is everyone doing? Everyone doing good?
Well, I guess I'm everyone. Hanging in there. Just another day in paradise.
Right, let's jump straight through our usual rituals, and then we can get started introducing people and get on with the stream. So, Scott.
Let's cut this short. Don't be an idiot. Don't do anything that's adult content, rude, offensive, no incels, bigotry, things like that. If you get banned from here, we're going to pass your name around to everybody else that we know, and you'll end up getting banned from their stuff too. And remember to have a good time.
Indeed, have a good time. And just a side note, if you do want to post links, you can't. We won't see the messages at all. Yeah. So just make sure that you use, if you want to post code, go to gist.new, and that will take you to a new gist link for GitHub. And you just post your code there and grab the hash from the URL and post that in the chat, and we can look it up from that. Right. Let's do introductions. My name's Sam Lightfoot, Flutter community leader, CTO at Dev Angels London. You can follow me on Twitter at Dev Angels London, and on BSkyB and Blue Sky and all those other fun places. Scott.
My name is Scott Stahl. I am also a Flutter community leader and organizer of GDG Cleveland. You can find me either, well, no, you can't find me on X anymore. You can find me on Blue Sky at the address there that's next to my name.
And we also have a Randall. Randall, welcome to the stage.
Hey, everybody. Greetings once again. It's been another week, so here I am back again. Randall Schwartz. I am a Dart and Flutter Google developer expert, which is not a Google position. It's merely a relationship with Google. And what it allows me to do is spend a lot of time answering questions for y'all on Discord and Slack and Stack Overflow and Reddit and places like that, and also present at meetings and stuff. If invited, please invite me because I love to go places. And for this show, I am the question magician, which means that I am watching the chat, the live chat that we have on YouTube, and I'm watching for you to put Q: in front of your question. When I see that, I flag it so that we get it in our queue. Oh, there's a bad pun again. And if you don't put Q: in front of it, I'm not sure whether it's for us or you're just chatting amongst yourselves, because that happens a lot too. So I will also be answering questions as I have knowledge for and time, and I can get a word in edgewise when Simon's talking. Yeah.
One thing real quick, just to clarify, Simon had mentioned a couple things. One, about if you put a link in your YouTube message, YouTube cuts off your entire message and doesn't send it. You will see it in your chat. No one else will see it. And then when you go to gist.new, I think that's it, right?
Yep, gist.new. Yeah.
Gist.new, and you create a gist, there's a huge number that's at the end of the URL. That's the hash that we need. So grab that number, and then you go into chat, you tell us you have a gist, and here's the number, and then we can use that to look up your code.
Right. Time to introduce some people.
Yes.
Shall
we have a gentleman here from Very Good Ventures. We will let you we will let him tell you about himself. David.
Hey, everybody. Good day, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're from. How's it going?
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I think it's the first
Thanks
time
for
I've
coming.
ever actually been on the show, even though
Oh no, it's not, is it?
I think so, actually. But yeah, no, thanks for you guys doing this. You know, it's a long time you guys been doing this.
Well,
so yeah. Well, yeah, I'm thanks, Scott. I'm David DeRemer, so founder and CEO of BGB. Been doing a lot of Flutter work over the last going on 7 years or something like that. So yeah, here to answer any questions. Probably don't want to give me any hardcore technical questions. Don't test my Flutter knowledge at this point. I definitely would want to bring in some others of the team, but yeah, happy to help talk about Flutter, what's going on, business, the market, industry, whatever you guys want to talk about today.
Yeah, see, we always get a lot of highly technical people on the show, and I thought it would be better to get someone who's got a good feel for not just the market, but also the market with large companies, because people are asking about this constantly. So guys, remember, David is in management. Okay. If you have technical questions, ask Simon. If you have questions about the market out there for companies that are looking for Flutter apps, that's a David question.
Sorry about that. We also have Raph. Raph, want to join us?
Yeah.
There you go.
Has finally listened to me and gotten himself on the show.
Long time no see, so glad I'm here today. So I'm Raf. I'm doing some Flutter community stuff. I'm here to have fun and hopefully answer some questions.
So David, how's BGB going? Let's start the show. Like, is strength to strength at the moment? Is it all good in the hood?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, well, first of all, the big question is, are we all going to have jobs in 5 years or shorter with AI and everything, right? All those sorts of things. But no, overall, I think things are going really well. We as a company, we've been doing all right. We've got some really great new people we've added to the team and just continue to grow. Got some great ongoing relationships and things that we're doing. It's always a tough slog. It's never easy. It's not easy for us. It's not easy for anyone in what we do. So, it's always about what's the next project coming in the door. But we're very, we count our blessings. We grew quite a lot over the last year, and got a great team of people, and really, really great. I feel very fortunate and lucky to work with the people I work with every single day, and the clients that we get to make an impact with. So, yeah, overall, it's pretty good. Can always be better, but overall pretty good. So
It is good news.
Yeah.
I've just been eyeing up the release notes for the latest version of Flutter.
I have heard a rumor that John is on the way. So just letting you know.
Yeah. The Flutter announcement, I'm going to have to dig it out now. Had quite a few crash bugs and like quite serious issues that have been resolved in that version.
Yeah.
Release. So it's definitely worth upgrading to that if anyone's considering it right now. I'm going to dig it out now.
It's one thing we can say is we have never been short of upgrades.
Yep.
Especially in the very beginning. To retell an old story that I haven't told in a while. For whatever reason, when we were all in the Getter, which was back around the days when David and crew and Posse had just released the Hamilton app. For whatever reason, I decided to update my Flutter repo or my Flutter SDK by using the zip file. Don't ask me whatever possessed me. I don't know. So I downloaded on Friday. On Sunday, I install it. It says I'm 51 commits behind master. So I go ahead into the chat and I say, I just opened this thing up and I'm already 51 commits behind master. Don't you people have anything better to do on a Sunday? And Remy answers right away, no. So
it was, I mean, this is the thing with most projects, right? When it's alpha, when you don't care about breaking changes, when you can do that kind of stuff, you can move super quick. When it's like that prototype MVP sort of stage, and as soon as you get to the project that starts getting larger, the weight of technical debt gets larger, and you move slower, and obviously more team members as well. So it's just the nature of things, I think. Yeah. So this is let's get out of the way. Yeah. So 3.27 just got released. So one of these was quite interesting. Was it this one? Was this one, wasn't it? Unfocus. Some image on the web render blank. A search, failed assertion of the web engine. I think would actually cause a crash in apps. Incorrect Z order rendering and draw points. App may crash from obsolete engine assertion. That's the one. And this was kind of interesting. Display cutouts on Android will don't get updated when you rotate upon screen rotation, which was they used to, but I guess not anymore. Hey, welcome.
Hey, John.
Yeah. So anyway, grab it what you can. Welcome to stream, John.
Yeah, thanks. How's it going? Happy New Year.
What else the panel? There you go.
You could have John introduce himself.
Yes, introduce yourself, John. Sorry.
Hi, I'm John.
There you go. I'm John.
He was
I'm here, anonymous.
No,
Yeah.
his employer is not the enemy.
Been doing this for a while. I manage the Flutter Medium. I join here occasionally. Not as much recently as I would have hoped, but hopefully more often moving forward. And yeah, that's about it. Hang out in Discord and other places answering questions with Randall.
Yeah.
Here's an important thing.
See him
Did
on there
someone
all the
make you
time.
take down your
my
Flutter
headphones
F?
killed.
Oh,
Yeah, where's your big F?
What happened?
we did lose the audio.
They got it.
I lost you.
Yep, I guess you did.
Anyway, right. Well, we'll carry on whilst he's figuring that one out.
Sure.
Yes,
So,
we
let's
could
see here.
jump into some Q&A whilst he's trying to figure out his earbud situation.
Try that. Nope.
Can you hear us? No, that's a no. Fun times.
So I have a question for David.
That works.
David, how do I get a contract for $20 million from the Acme super conglomerate company?
Worked very hard.
Good question. If you figure that out, let me know. You mean like like to build an app for them or something?
No, so they just give me $20 million.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Let's drink the chat.
If you asked,
I think that involves, some psychedelics or something to really bend your mind into the alternate reality. No, I mean, I think the question is, how can we get work with Flutter, right? Is that where you're getting it?
In general, yeah.
I wish I knew a secret recipe. Ultimately at the end of the day, it's no different than anything else. I think it's one thing I came across recently that I've just really grabbed onto for the last couple of weeks is the concept of like increasing your surface area for luck. Just being out there doing more things, meeting more people, networking, talking, asking for a connection and introduction. One of the things we've always done from very early on was try to be very open with sharing, right? Writing content, creating OSS packages, right? Writing about how we do things, how we do stuff. All that stuff is important, just get the word out there. And that's partly what you guys have been doing here, like just really evangelizing and advocating for Flutter, for the impact it can have, and hopefully create an opportunity where somebody can be aware of you. Ultimately it's about awareness, connection, and confidence and trust, right? So we did some research 2 years ago, something that with some of our clients and sort of like ICP type people, where the vast majority of people find someone to work with by asking a peer, asking someone else. And that's a really big thing. So it comes down to reputation. And again, like increasing that surface area for someone to be aware of and find a connection to you.
Nice. So in large part, it's who you know, but who you know depends on increasing your surface area.
That's right.
And talking to people.
That's right. You're you could do amazing work, right? You could be the best developer in the world, but if no one knows you're available or out there or knows how to reach out to you and get to you, they're going to go somewhere else. So the downside, I know Simon and I have talked about this a lot over the years. You get the big consulting companies, the big firms, and they have large teams and stuff like that. And they have, one of the things that they have is relationships, right? A big company like Accenture or somebody like that is going to have an executive level relationship with the partners of that business. And so they already have a huge advantage in that regard, just because they know people. That's what keeps those big companies big, right? So we got to work a little harder. And I think that's what we've all been doing here with this type of community stuff and going to events and FlutterCon and things like that, is putting ourselves in a position to be known and to be seen as somebody who could help.
I think there's I mean, you just raised 2 points there, which I thought was quite interesting. Flutter itself, always from the very beginning, I think, has been something that people want to evangelize because it has solved so many people's problems. It feels good to develop in it. So you kind of get this already, you get this kind of like in sort of community around Flutter itself, just because of the nature of the product, I think. And then there's also, it always reminds me of like Coca-Cola, right? Like, the only reason I think that it's not just because Coca-Cola exists, but it's just advertised everywhere, right? You see it everywhere. Therefore, it's in your mind. You're like, oh, I fancy a Coca-Cola. There's that kind of like aspect to it as well. And it's like that kind of, if no one knows about it, they're not going to drink it or use it or whatever, right? So I just wonder, like, you talk about like, when you talk about companies and expenditure on marketing, it's like, just imagine how much Coca-Cola spend, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Flutter always had a really special thing that I think it's easy to overlook in retrospect, which in the early days, especially, and I think probably still today, people getting into it, it did just feel better, you know? I think Flutter's growth had a different path. This is anecdotal. I don't have data to back up this point, but in the early days, it felt like people getting into Flutter were mobile developers. They were like iOS or in particular Android developers. And Flutter just felt like a breath of fresh air. You know, it just felt better. It felt more fun. It's like less time dealing with your tools and more time just like creating cool stuff. Really? And I think that led a lot to the enthusiasm in the early days. Just like it just kind of made people feel good. It made them feel better. Felt like it gave them some superpowers. That was really fun. Could get out of the way. I don't know if you remember Martin Ryback. He was an early community member, ran Flutter NYC, and worked for VGB for quite some time and was impactful for us in our story. And I just remember him talking about that it just like made him feel good about his job again. And so that enthusiasm, I think, was super important to the early days of Flutter's adoption because people just wanted it to succeed because they liked it. You know, now, right, where companies are like, well, let's use Flutter because it'll save us money or something. It doesn't feel the same, you know, sometimes like the same motivation. But at the core, I think, is the developer experience is fundamentally what's made Flutter, I think, pretty successful.
As I say,
Flutter was my first mobile framework, and I've been told by people who came up through the traditional Android or iOS or both road trip that I had it lucky. So I never had to learn all the crap with Android and iOS.
Tell me about it.
There we go. Simon's confirming that for sure.
I took a certification course in Android, and before I finished it, I had already jumped over to Flutter, but I had to go through the motions and finish the course to get my Android certification. But yeah, never used it.
Can you say that it made our hearts flutter?
I see what you did there. Nice.
I mean, I think this is one of the things that I think there's definitely an interesting point here around development, right? In terms of, I mentioned this at the beginning, like as something grows, you get a lot of legacy in a code base, right? And that means that you get tripped up and that you want to make one change, it affects a bunch of other things. They have to be changed and it becomes slower to modify because you're trying to support lots of things. So one of the things that the community went through at the very beginning was the request to have breaking changes in the platform, right? To have a breaking change management and to not have this. There's the two. Sorry, John, I'm not going to put your company in this, but there's two kind of train of thought. It's like the Apple way of kind of like, let's just every new version only works with the latest versions, screw backwards compatibility in a nice way. Yeah. And then Microsoft way is just like, oh my God, let's make it all backwards compatible forever. And they're very different ways about dealing with these things. But I think there's problems in both those two approaches, right? And I think when it comes to a framework like this, you can go quite far in just keeping ahead of the curve, right? And I think we're not having that at the moment. I think we still need. I'm hoping that the Flutter team themselves take this in consideration and actually start doing like good sort of like washes through the framework and saying, okay, what are the stats in this widget's not being used, let's deprecate it, you know, let's get rid of it, let's make a replacement that's way better, or combine multiple widgets together because they're not being used separately, or whatever it might be, just to kind of work on the existing stuff, not stop building new things, right? Like let's get rid of the old stuff and keep current, because yes, it's a pain when it comes to development. Like you want to like upgrade and you now need to port something, right? But Flutter doesn't make it that difficult to do that kind of stuff, and they provide really excellent, you know, guides and information on the Flutter website on how you can migrate.
Nice. David, another question for you. Sure. A lot of people are trying to go it alone, or just with a few people. So when you have a potential client who comes up, what do you expect from them, and what do you expect to have to do yourself? And by this, what I mean is client first meeting, very first meeting. Do you ask them if they have a spec? Maybe a lot of our people here don't know what a spec is. What are you expecting to have from them as far as things like an actual spec, artwork, et cetera, or, you know, are you expecting them to have it, or are you looking at possibly developing it for them? Or, you know, do you work with the dreaded client who says, well, just come up with something and wants it all for one flat rate? You know, so that's another thing too. I mean, would you set up a pricing structure? So I'm Joe client, I walk in, what are you expecting from me?
That really depends on there's no clear answer to that realistically. I mean, every situation is different. I think the challenge in professional services or consulting is how do you get any degree of scalability, right? Because every client situation truly is a snowflake, right? It's just a unique situation. Where they are in the process, how big the scale is, do they have budget? Do they understand how hard this stuff really is? I think one thing I've always felt about the app stores is like when you go and you look at it, you're like, oh, there's millions of apps that are free. They must be really easy to make. And as we all know, or else why would they give it away for free? You know, I think to do things at scale, to do things really, really well, it's very difficult. It's you need a lot of different disciplines. You need a lot of different information. I mean, fundamentally, you have to know like what is the strategy and why. Like, why are you doing this in the first place? If you're a business, do you have the true understanding of like why you're doing it, what the business impact is going to be, and the total cost of ownership of doing this thing? Because like that whole point of like a fixed fee thing is one anecdote I've always had is like apps to me are like an organism. It's a living, breathing thing. Software, as we were just saying, Simon, about just going through the release notes, like these things are never done, never, ever. Yeah. Nothing is ever done. It's like a human life, right? It's like you're born. And I think a lot of consulting companies and clients focus just on like the pregnancy phase of an app. It's like gestation. Cool. Like the app was born. But in reality, like all of us, like life is what happens after that, you know, and that's actually the bulk of the experience. But so much energy is just getting to launch or getting to version 1. And I think you really have to think about what is the life of this thing out in the world. And I would fundamentally challenge any client to make sure that they're thinking about that. If they're not thinking about what happens after launch, I would really question whether you want to work with them, because they're really not thinking about this in terms of the long run of it. Now, if it's a small thing, if it's a prototype, if it's a small business opportunity where it's like a very, very crystal clear scope, if you're building a calculator, right? And it's like, once you figure out how to do addition and subtraction, like it's kind of good. Probably like the laws of math are not going to change that much for that application. Then you can probably ship it and feel pretty good about it. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge range of this. We get everything from clients that are already in flight and they're looking for help. They just want more people. They want resources. We get everything from, we have an idea, we want to do this. How do we bring it to life? We got to figure out what the features are, what the product definition and strategy is, what the design is. How are we going to do that? How do we map the design and our ambition and appetite with like our budget and capability and timeline? You know, what is it like time, features and money, like choose two, right? That sort of thing. So I would say it really varies. If it's a big, large enterprise, they're going to have totally different expectations, needs, budgets, timeframes, requirements, everything else than, you know, a single startup with a single founder with, you know, a small budget or something. So unfortunately, there's no easy answer. I think the objective is to try to find some consistency and some ways that you can do things repeatedly. That's one thing that we try to do that Flutter really enabled, frankly, that was not possible in previous situations I was in, where if you're doing even just iOS and Android, to maintain any degree of like template or foundational architecture or structure, even just having two of them was really, really hard. And Flutter enabled us to like align on architectural patterns and standards and templates and tools that we use in a repeatable process. That gave us some degree of scalability. That's 100% because Flutter and the multi-platform perspective, you know? So that's, I think, been a huge win of Flutter. And I think our ability to leverage that into Flutter has been, was proof of Flutter's potential and capability as well.
Nice. We got another one here. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Simon.
I was going to say another interesting point. I think Flutter's like the hot reload, hot restart, just instant change aspect of it also has fundamentally changed things, right? Because like you could sit with a client and say, "You mean like this? You mean like that?" You know, you could actually like there's ways of actually working there which speed up the waterfall flow, as it were, that kind of recycle that you have to go through. So
yeah, I personally have always liked that point of like the living, breathing aspect of this. And, you know, there's even in professional services, there's a tension between, do you do T&M, do you do value-based pricing, you know, essentially fixed fee, all those sorts of things.
I'm sorry, T&M?
Time and materials.
For the audience?
You know, time and materials, yeah. You know, just being paid hourly. There's trade-offs to both. And I think the goal is to make sure that you set the expectation with somebody that like, this isn't something that you just launch it and it lives forever. You're not buying a TV or something, right? Where you buy it, you hang it on the wall and you're good. This is something that's going to be maintained, updated, and you got to have the appetite for that. And also like, you got to protect yourself. You're a professional, you got bills to pay. Your time is valuable. You know, I think one thing that happens a lot of these situations is you feel like you need the client, right? You need their work. And so you're sort of disadvantaged and they're sort of in a position of strength, but you got to remember that they need you too. You know, they need you to do the work and they have to respect that. Like for you to do that work, it takes your time, it takes your expertise. In an hourly rate is not just the cost of your hour today. It's all the experience you've built up to make that hour of work productive. So I think it's just important that you maintain really strong, healthy relationships with people you work with, so that people understand the value, where those issues don't really become an issue because they understand like the point of what you're trying to do is make the thing better.
It always reminded me
on the.
I
was going to say, on the subject of updates, we have a question from the audience about exactly that. So, how would you handle a situation when clients are requesting an update, but the timeline is insufficient and there's a risk of breaking things?
Well, okay, you got a few things here, right? So how good, like, what is the update? Again, what's the value? What's the purpose? Is there a business case? You know, what is it about the timeline? If the timeline's insufficient, then you need more resources to do it within that time frame, or you need to change the scope. You know, like fundamentally, there are laws of the universe that we can't get around. You know what I mean? And if there's a risk of things breaking, I think you just got to be crystal clear with a client. If timeline is short and it's a reasonable thing to do and there's high risk, well, your price better go up, right? Risk reward. That's how it works. So I think, again, it's a matter of making sure that it's like, you're in this together, you're a partnership. Like, you want to achieve these same goals for the client. Like, yeah, I want to do it. I want to make this update happen. I want to make it happen on this timeline, but there's risk. And what are we going to do together to make it feasible for us to do this? So
I mean, it's about having that discussion, right, with the clients, about managing expectations. It's about explaining and having them understand the position that they're putting you in and the position that they're putting the project in. Essentially, the fact of the matter is, if you can't be done in that amount of time, then they need to understand that and say that and give them options. And then they're going to say, "Oh no, we'll push a deadline. We'll give you the extra time because we can understand that we want this feature," right? Or they reduce the scope, as they were saying, and then they have a lesser feature by that sort of time, and then V2 can have the full thing.
I think communication and education is the critical thing. You know, you have to communicate. You have to. It's fundamentally like core, and educate. You know, especially if it's a non-technical person. explaining why and bringing them along for the ride. I think that for non-technical people, there's a fear of this black box of like not knowing what's going on. And am I getting the good work out of the people I've partnered with to do this? So just explaining to them, bringing them along for the ride of like where the risk lies, why the timeline is difficult, or what options you might have, and make those decisions together, I think is fundamentally the core. There's some unreasonable people out there on both sides of the table, both people doing the work and people, contracting for the work. And you have to navigate that, but that just comes down to good relationships, good open communication. It's not like it's the same as any other relationship you have. A family relationship, a romantic relationship, or anything like that. It's all just about, if you have good communication, you can get through a lot of things. So
I know I had a situation one time where somebody changed the UI 5 times. Then they asked me why it was taking so long. So also, it kind of reminds me of something a friend of mine once said: good, cheap, and fast. Pick two. You only get two.
Yep.
Yeah.
I only get one.
Point.
Yeah,
This was cheap.
pretty much.
Shall we jump through, get some of these questions? And then we'll
Yeah,
see.
these are more technical. Was trying to make sure we, because David's only got a limited amount of time, folks. So if you have any questions for David from the business standpoint, make sure to get him in now. He's not going to be here for the entire show.
I mean,
Can you just fix it? Was a response I got after communication.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's like I love you said about the bad client of just, you come up with the idea, you come up with it, right? Like it's like,
Oh, I hate
and
that.
then of course you come up with something, and then they come back with, that's not what I had in mind. It's like, what?
This is not exclusive to software engineering. There's a really great book that I read a long time ago. It's about the founders of Brooklyn Brewery, and I remember if you know Brooklyn Brewery, they have kind of some iconic branding, and they hired Milton Glaser, I think is his name. He's the guy who came up with the I Heart New York graphic and all that, kind of an iconic designer in New York City. And they went to him, and he's one of the top brand designers on the planet, and he went off and he did the brand work. And he's like, here's your logo. And they're like, I don't like it, and he's like, I don't really care. I'm the designer. This is your logo. And they're like, no, I don't like it. And he's like, no, you guys don't understand. Like, this is your logo. We're done. And it went on to become like one of the most iconic beer logos ever made, And so I think it's a matter of just trust and like remembering who is the expert. When you hire a really amazing brand designer, you have your own opinions. And I actually don't, I think engineers, we actually have it kind of good, because people don't understand code. They can't read code, but everyone can look at the design and have an opinion. Be like, I don't like that color. Yeah. Change that color. Can you make that blue? I like blue, And so I think designers actually have a different set of challenges sometimes, but I think it still comes down to trust and like remembering why you reached out to that person in the first place. You reached out to them for their expertise, for the knowledge they've accumulated. And really, when you start getting those questions, it's a matter of trust and making sure that people understand, hey, like, you hired me, you asked me for my opinion. This is my opinion. If you don't like it, why'd you ask me? Otherwise, can we move on?
I'd say it's not quite completely clean for software engineers, though, because you get a manager who's read somewhere clean code is required, and they start coming down with all these edicts, must be done according to clean code standards, regardless of what that actually means in real life, which it doesn't. It has interesting connotations and stuff. And so they get hung up on that this is like management by magazine, as I used to hear about it. People would flip through at a level that they shouldn't, and starting to make decisions about things they have no clue about. So that does happen too. So it's not just design area, it's also in software.
We also have
one of the things that I was just, one of the things I was just laughing about. We do this all the time.
There's a delay.
One of the things I was laughing about is I used to do custom tile work a long time ago. One of the rules is you never, ever, ever pick the color for the client, because if the lady of the house doesn't like it, it's always your fault.
Now I forgot what I was going to say. It can't be that important. Right. Anyway.
One
right,
thing to
here's
remember
another-
that in professional services, our job is not just to write code or to do the thing they've asked us to do. Our job is to manage them as well and navigate through their own dysfunction, right? If a client mismanages a timeline or request, I mean, this is something we talk about. If we get ourselves in a position where there's a challenge because the scope is wrong, or there's a review process that we're getting feedback late in the process we didn't get earlier, we look at that and we say, well, yes, you can point fingers at other people, but fundamentally, if our job is to be there and help coach them through, we do this all the time. They don't. Maybe they only do one app every 10 years or something like that. We have to be better at managing them. We have to be better. Like, that's what partnership is working through their own challenge. It's not just the code. You can't just get like laser focused on like, well, I wrote this code, I delivered this many lines of code. It's my job is to get you a result, an outcome. And sometimes that's making sure that we are setting up good presentations to communicate to the boss's boss's boss, or it's making sure that we identify the stakeholders and who is likely to do what we call the swoop and poop at the end, you know? You got to make sure you get ahead of that. And I think that's why it's called, client relationship management, right? Professional services, consulting, right? If you want to do software engineering, get a job at a product company. That's software engineering. If you want to do, contract work, you're in professional services, right? Client relationship management. And that's why I'm actually ultimately not too concerned about AI in the long run, because AI is not going to manage these things we're talking about, right?
Well, there's the meme that says for AI to be able to place developers, project managers have to be able to communicate exactly what they want.
Yeah,
we're safe.
Yeah. So swoop and poop, that's an old phrase I heard when I worked at Frog Design back in the day. And that's sort of like, you're in the final minute, the deliverables going out tomorrow, and somebody, in a position of leadership swoops in at the last minute and is like, I don't like it. And then you're like, you could have told us that a month ago, and we would have been able to navigate. So I think that's also just a leadership thing we should all be aware of. Is like, if the thing's going out tomorrow or soon or urgent deadline, that is not the time to introduce your own personal preferences or opinions or things that are not mission critical. You got to make sure you have the discernment as a leader to know when you want to say. It's really hard. I struggle with that on a daily basis because, on the flip side, you're like, well, if I have this opinion, I don't want to hold it back, but you don't also want to disrupt the flow of the team. And it's also a question of like, is it really worth it? Is it really valuable? If it fundamentally is going to change the nature of the product and the result, then yeah, you got to speak up, but otherwise just be aware of all the hard work that people have put into it and be respectful of that. And that's I'm not just talking about client relationships. I'm talking about as a team too, right? How we work together and how we collaborate. And, if you see something in a pull request that it doesn't exactly match your idea of what the best thing is, but it's still fine, like if it's early in the project, yeah, make that a teaching moment. If you're got an urgent deadline and you're shipping tomorrow, maybe ship it and flag it for a future review and kind of come back to it later.
Nice. Got a question here from the audience. What's the best way? Basically what this is what's the best way to handle with the situation when the client is saying, should we do it in React Native or Flutter? And they often have to sell Flutter as a solution in this debate.
Oh, the question as old as Flutter time. I mean, ultimately, there's no answer. There's no right answer to this question, in my opinion. I think it's you just have to do the assessment. You have to do the analysis, and it's different for every team. That's something that I think should apply to any technical choice. And we say the same thing, even though we're all about Flutter, we have our own architectural patterns. If you look at our very, very good practices page, and we're fans of block, and I know not everybody is. Kind of doesn't matter. I mean, you do you, we'll do us. It's a matter of just like picking the things and stick to it that you think work. If you're a team that is really strong in JavaScript, if you've got good management practices, you've got a lot of React experience, you got a lot of good mobile discipline, React Native could be a totally fine solution. I think React Native was clever branding. I think especially in the early days, React and React Native are not as similar as people thought. But if you get to the point of like a couple ladders up, people will be like, hey, we're going to do this in React Native. And that leader has already heard React. Like, oh, we do React, right? Cool. Okay. Yeah. So React Native seems like a no brainer, but they're not necessarily, it's like a, like I used to joke early on. I wonder what would have happened if Flutter was called, what do you call it? Why is my brain Angular Native, right? Like if Flutter had been called Angular Native, and it wasn't Angular at all, right? But it was just called that. Whether or not people who were like, oh, well, we use Angular, right? Like, okay, yeah, let's use Angular Native, even though it's like something totally different. So, ultimately these choices are up to the team. And I think the key is making sure you're doing a proper evaluation and doing real testing. Those of you that know me or have seen me talk before, I'm a big fan of like what Sam Moore and Betterment team did there. I think they have like some really sound experimental methodologies and things that they've done to figure out how to introduce new technologies to the team. And it's not just like, oh, I read a blog post about Flutter and think it's really cool. It's like, let's test it, let's go run an experiment. Like, let's see if all the things that are on the marketing pages about how great this is work for us. Let's see if we actually experience that and if we like it. And so anybody who's kind of making a decision in isolation based on a spreadsheet where they haven't actually tested it or put a team against it or thought through like what we're going to do, like, okay, we got a bunch of JavaScript developers who are really good at React. Are we going to have them work on our React Native app? If not, and that's a totally new team that we're going to have to reskill, hire, build, that's not like a business value. We're not getting any efficiency out of that. We might as well build a Flutter team or just do it natively or whatever. So, I mean, you got to really think through your strategies. And I think you got to really push people to like actually understand their motivations and needs and how they're going to actually execute this stuff and make sure you're making choices objectively and like what's really going to fit for your team. React Native is as much as we, have flame wars back and forth. And, I know the React Native community tends to like to glom onto any sort of thing that puts Flutter at a disadvantage. They're both good tools. Let's be honest. I think we're in a good situation where we have good tools we can choose. Flutter's one of them. Maybe this is sacrilegious, but React Native, it does the job in a lot of situations, right? I don't think this sort of like comparison thing where one has to win at the expense of the other. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think it's productive. Actually, we want competition, right? In most ecosystems where there is no competition, it's actually unhealthy. And so I think competition is important. Having options and tools is important. But I think fundamentally you have to make your right choice. I would say Flutter is in particularly a really good choice if you're looking beyond mobile, if you're especially like embedded or other applications. I think where I'd love to see Flutter go is really position as the true multi-platform aspect of it. This cross-platform like iOS and Android, that's obvious, and that's where I think you really directly compete head to head. But I look at the stuff where embedded type applications, Linux type applications, hardware, that is really cool stuff. And that's where I would love to see us push the Flutter ecosystem a little bit more. I think that's going to be a lot harder for the React world to go to, or at least not hard, but like at least Flutter is, I think it's a much happier path to do that. And so, in an operating system like Linux, maybe where there are no native widgets for React Native to talk to, it doesn't even make sense. So, yeah.
We have React Native then.
What else we got? I do have a hard stop at 1, just so you all know.
On the hour.
Oh, come on. I can't do this all myself. We got 6 people on this screen.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, there are other questions, but they're technical. So I'm trying to take care of David's stuff first since he's got to leave.
Sure. I didn't see anything else that was David oriented, or I would have flagged it by now.
Yeah. Master MB, I've already answered your question there in the chat. So it's asking how to see a comprehensive list of all the widgets. It's the widget catalog.
And prepare to spend some time.
Yes, many widgets.
You can also go to api.flutter.dev, look up the widget class, and see all the subclasses.
Don't repeat your question, please.
Yeah,
sorry.
You're getting out of the list here. I'm picking them out.
Yeah, you just got bumped.
Yeah, I'm moving you down, Oglethorpe.
when people ask a question more than one time, we take you out of the list where you were and you lose your place and you go back to the bottom. So each time a question is answered, it goes to the bottom.
Looks like
I'm
Lee
sorry,
has a
asked.
question for David, or in general, but kind of geared at David.
There we go.
What's the best way to find and hire Flutter developers? Talk to me. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can talk to that a little bit. Best way to find and hire Flutter developers. This is the developer job market is one that I think has been an important discussion within the Flutter community for quite some time. One of the things we talk about is this sort of seemingly at odds statements you hear that companies say, "Oh, it's hard to hire Flutter developers," and Flutter developers say, "Oh, how do I get better job opportunities?" And so those two seems like, oh, there's a mismatch there. I know early on there was like Flutter jobs and some other things. I think one of the symptoms of Flutter becoming more mature and becoming more popular out there is I think it's just a little bit more commonplace. And I think companies are just putting their job posts on normal job boards. One thing that I think is troublesome to find a job is that people are keyword stuffing it. I don't know if you guys have come across this where like job posts out there and it's like experience in frameworks like React, Xamarin, Flutter, and you're like, I don't know. This just seems like you're just trying to catch any sort of like search filter. And then is the job really
question
Flutter?
then becomes, as the job seeker, do you just apply for things that it doesn't look like you're qualified for because this was obviously written by someone in HR who has no idea what they're talking about?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you got to hit all the job boards because I wouldn't expect that there's some sort of magic place where all the Flutter jobs are posted that you can go and find it. I mean, you got to just search like you normally would, finding a good recruiter maybe who has experience in doing this stuff. Like looking for companies like VGB or consulting companies to get a job and get some of that experience and getting exposure to the types of companies that are out there maybe is useful. But there's also just this weird challenge I think big companies have where they are slow to hire, and these days more and more RTO type stuff or return to office things. And so I think the Flutter community being so global and all over the place, it's a little bit of a challenge to find remote work versus a lot of the bigger companies I think want to find people who are local, and so that's a little bit restrictive sometimes. So if you're open to moving, I think that creates a lot of opportunity potentially. Keeping track of the companies that are in the Flutter community. I just have some job filters on Google search. Anything shows up with Flutter. You got to filter out all the like structural Flutter engineering job posts in aerospace. Right? You came across that. Like apparently there's a idea of a Flutter engineer that manages like flutter of metal on a wing of an airplane or something. But yeah, I mean, I fundamentally don't think it's any different from any other engineering job at this stage. I think it's changed a little bit where in the early stages of Flutter, we had these pockets that you could really go to and there were some good opportunities. But I think one of the things about Flutter, it's great. Flutter's become, I think, way more ubiquitous than we all even really realize. And I think so what that means is a lot of those jobs are being filled internally by engineers who are just flipping over. Something to consider. So
yeah, if anybody doesn't know,
many of the jobs. Sorry.
I was just going to say real quick, if anybody doesn't know, if an airplane overspeeds, the wing can begin to do this. Yeah, and that's what they refer to as Flutter. So if a Flutter engineer is a specialist who deals with that. Yep. I'm sorry, Randall?
One of the things I recognize is that there's a few things. I'm constantly looking for work because that's kind of the nature of being a contractor. So a few things I've noticed. One is that they'll often spell out a dollar figure. And it's very, of course, hugely based on cost of living for us. I mean, like the money I need in the US is different from what somebody would need, say, in India. And so that sometimes skews the searches, trying to figure out why the heck are only offering $500 a month for this thing? This is like, senior level developer for $500 a month. And you have to remember that it's cost of living based. So it's people are paying what they can afford in those areas. The other is that it does seem, I'm of course biased towards remote jobs because I live in Portland, Oregon. This is Crater Lake in Oregon, so I'm hometown pride here. And I'd rather stay here. I'd rather be local and only go a few miles in either direction. I don't want to be jumping on airplanes all the time. So I'm not looking for any work that's outside of the Portland metro area unless it's remote. And it turns out about half of the jobs I find that have any kind of opportunity for me to do in Flutter are remote. So that actually works out pretty well. So if you're looking for remote gigs, Flutter seems to be pretty ripe for that. Not a bad deal.
Well, I think
Now,
from what I've seen, that's part of that is due to trying to find somebody. A lot of companies that I've seen start with, they want somebody local, but they can't find anybody local. So then they start opening it up to hiring somebody remote.
Right.
So I think that's part of it too, especially here in the US. I mean,
Yeah.
where I think we've all seen that the job market in the US is picking up for Flutter, whereas maybe other areas over in Europe and others have been ahead of us as far as, the number of jobs available for Flutter developers.
I would also encourage Flutter engineers to not just be Flutter engineers. I think in my opinion, engineers in general should be curious. We should be experimental and exploring, at least try some backend stuff, get familiar with databases. That makes you more well-rounded, I think, as an engineer. And that, again, is going to increase your surface area for luck there. If you have more things that you can talk to and search for and resonate with, early stage companies are going to have more flexibility in technology choices. So maybe you could even influence, if they're looking for a mobile engineer and you get in there and influence them to select Flutter, then you kind of create your own Flutter job. Larger enterprises, one thing to consider is like they hire with bureaucratic processes. So they might have a recruiting company that all things go through, or they only post on their job site or something like that. So just maintaining a good list. And that's why I've been on a campaign to try to get as many companies betting on Flutter, building with Flutter as possible, to like talk about the fact that they're doing it, just to put them on the radar. And the number one reason why they should do it is to increase their own surface area for luck to get the best engineers. If people don't know they're working with Flutter, how are they going to attract, Flutter engineers to them to get that best talent? And so I think that's the fundamental motivation. And companies pay a lot of money on recruiters. That can be quite an expensive line item if you're having a recruiter go out and hire people. So if they write a blog post or something about how they're using Flutter and that attracts really great engineers from the Flutter community to them for jobs, that could potentially have a lot of cost savings for them in terms of recruiting cost and employer branding and stuff. So this is why we got to be screaming from the top of the mountain about, hey, everybody, like if you're a company building with Flutter, you got to tell the story, put it out there in the world, put it on the radar.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of overlap between people looking for Flutter and people looking for Perl, though. So it doesn't really help for me to know that kind of back end.
Yeah.
Right. We have a few minutes to the top of the hour.
Well, about 3 minutes here. Richard, you asked a question about partners, but we're not quite able to understand what you mean. So if you want to throw that one in there real quick for David. I
think when I read it, it sounded to me like, do they partner with somebody on an app as opposed to, like almost like an equity state?
Oh, yeah.
In my experience, people who are freely offering equity are not valuing their equity very highly. So generally speaking, the other way to think about this too is like, what is your business model? If we're a professional services business, our business model is not an investment model like a VC fund or a product studio or something like that. And so building a product up front where you have to foot that bill, you got to invest in it, you got to build it. That business model is in many ways orthogonal to a consulting business model. And so you really got to ask yourself, what business are you in? Are you an investor? If you're an investor, then sure, you can do it if you believe in the idea. The other thing is a thing about investing in an idea like that, and do you want to have some equity or ownership, is I would always want to know what's the sales and marketing plan, because there's this whole like, if you build it, they will come mentality sometimes, especially in startups and early stage stuff. And they feel like the building it is the hard part, but the building it is the easy part because you can come to any of us and we can build it. You just pay us some money, we'll build it, right? getting customers to be aware of you and to use your product, and if it's a good thing and generate revenue, that's actually the hard part. So, you know, maybe if the team has a really strong marketing capability, brand recognition, top tier sales team, and you're like, okay, yeah, I can see where the ROI is going to come from this. But generally speaking, I feel like that insight of a company, like a founder who's like willingly and like aggressively willing to give away equity in this great idea that they think is the greatest thing in the world, that's a signal to you. You know, if you think you have the hot thing, that equity is the last thing you want to give up. That is the highest value thing you have. So I think a lot of times equity is just a way of asking you to do it for free.
Yeah. Well, I will say that is an interesting point, though. Like, it may be doing it for free, but the idea is that if you're at the beginning of your development journey, you're trying to get a portfolio, trying to do other things, this maybe is a way of you getting some work, which you would be doing anyway, right? For essentially for free, more near free, right? Yeah. But then you might get a return on investment from it. So that the trade-off there is a lot different, right? You can get the experience, you can get in your portfolio, you maybe get something out at the end of it, then you're on the plus side of that equation, right?
Totally.
So
yeah, that's a really great point, Simon. If you have some other value or benefit you're getting out of doing some of that work, or if you're getting paid and there's a little equity kicker and you're like, I would do it for this anyway, and the equity is just like icing on the cake and you never know, it's like a long-term bet, then why not? You know? But you got to just make that choice, and you got to figure out, am I getting some sort of return for myself on this? If you're getting the experience, you're getting the line item. And then I would just negotiate too. Like, hey, I want to make sure I can talk about this. I want to market this. I want to, promote the fact that I've done this and make sure I can speak freely about it. Cause like part of this is like me, I'm giving you this in exchange for the opportunity to have the expertise and the experience on my resume.
Yeah.
All right. Well, David, we really appreciate your time.
Yeah. No, thanks for
go over here. Want to respect your time.
Yeah, all good. I hope it was useful. I don't know.
Brilliant. Thank you.
We didn't, bigger picture. One thing I did want to say is, one thing I think we do have to get as a community out there is we need to get more companies talking about usage. I think that we can't seem to shake this feeling of some sort of inferiority complex with respect to React Native or other things. But I'm here to tell you all that there are a lot of big companies out there building with Flutter. The showcase page is full of big brands. I don't know how many more we need on there before people will fully feel comfortable with that. The thing that I'll also say is like financial services is really huge with Flutter. And those are like, there's a lot of money there. That is high compliance, high regulatory, high risk type things. And if big financial services companies are adopting Flutter, there's no barrier for like pretty much every other industry. I just keep in mind that I think a lot of what's happening that's transitioned with the Flutter ecosystem is companies are adopting it internally. And so they're bypassing the Flutter community. And that's something I think we need to be aware of. In the early days, almost everything filtered through the Flutter community because people were looking for help. They were looking for knowledge. They were looking for engineers. They were looking for that stuff. I think now big companies are making the decision to pick Flutter. They're tasking internal teams to learn and spin up Flutter. They're doing it all. And they're not coming to things like this. They're not going to FlutterCon. They're not engaging with Google. And so just keep in mind in terms of confidence in what we're doing, as signals diminish, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that maybe it's happening in a different way because Flutter's in a different phase of its life cycle. And I actually think that's a good thing. If companies are secure, happy, confident building with Flutter without coming here and talking about it, that means we won.
There you go. Yeah. I've got one more question for you real quick.
I got to go.
We have now had management at VGV. When do we get Jorge?
Oh yeah, I'll tell him. I'll get him on here. But I do have to go. I'm sorry. Thanks. It's nice to see everybody. To all the people out there, thanks for listening to me. Catch you later.
Cheers. That was nice.
All right. Now that we've made him late for a 1:00 meeting.
Yeah, apparently so. I'm gonna step into the back behind the scenes so that you guys have more screen room for that, and I'll be handling the questions from behind the scenes.
We have 12 technical questions now that we can get to. I know you all have been waiting, but it's not easy to get the CEO of VGV on here. So I wanted to make sure we milked it for everything it was worth it. So without further ado, I have an Ubuntu server running on a VirtualBox on my machine, building Flutter web apps. Is it possible to host it on my server and all people test it?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
it's possible. Yes. Do you really want to invite the world? Unless these are people you know.
Well, maybe I was gonna say maybe they
Have a
don't
bunch
mean
of
the
stuff.
world. Maybe they
I
mean
mean, no.
internal.
The problem is you have to keep that virtual box running, right? You have to keep that running, just like you would to your computer, so people can connect to it. If you want to do that, and then you could just port forward, right? So you can just like your virtual box instance is going to have an IP address. Just take your local router, whatever it is, port forward it, and then you have your public IP address that you assign to a website address, a domain name. You do it using DNS. You can do it with Google Cloud Platform, Cloud DNS, or your domain provider all have DNS solutions. Yeah, you just pop in the IP address, and then people go to that website address. It'll be routed to your router at home, and then that router port forwards to the VM, and the VM returns the web page. So yes, you can do it. It's as simple as turning on port forwarding on your router, which will be port 80 for HTTP and port 443 for HTTPS. And if you're doing SSL, then on your Ubuntu server you want to install Let's Encrypt, which is a free certificate package. It's normally called on Ubuntu. There's a package called CertBot, 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 and that allows you to like install easy certificates, SSL certificates on your whatever your service is that you're hosting on there, whatever your web app is, and that way you can be hosted secure. Most browsers now, especially Chrome, won't open web pages that aren't SSL encrypted. So yeah. It doesn't matter when it's localhost, by the way. Most browsers allow HTTP localhost, but that's it, because that's on your local machine. It's not going off network. But yeah, you try and go to any website that's HTTP. I pretty much you'll get the warning now. I think the warning of death saying you're going unsecure. Are you sure you want to go unsecure?
Yep.
And that your customers probably won't be helpful, or your clients won't be happy with that. So
no,
especially when there's a
Alrighty.
question with it. So
Yeah, just to add to that, if you're just building like Flutter web, it's just HTML, so you don't need like any specific server. You can just upload this to GitHub pages.
yeah, I was gonna say that's the other side of it, right? If you've not got an API or anything like that you're building, just throw it up on Firebase hosting or GitHub Pages, or pick your free web hosting
whatever
Google
web
Cloud
hosting.
Bucket and stick it there. There's lots of options, right? Yeah. It's a lot. I have to say that it adds time, right? Because you're adding multiple steps. If you're deving on the local machine, you can just make code change and they can just see it.
Yeah.
Right. They just refresh and they see it. Then that's maybe a different paradigm. That it's good if you're just trying to like beta or test things out for people, show them the work that's in progress. Then that also works.
So that's an interesting point too.
Too many free hosting servers take that chance. What?
Yeah. Why would you expose your machine and have people going to your machine when you could just put it up on a host?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Like it's not really about exposing your machine, right? If you're doing it in a VM, that's actually okay. I'd say that's fine.
Yeah, you're only
Exposing
supporting the port, so
yeah. So you go straight to the VM. If the VM is broken into or crashes or burns, that's a VM. It's fine, right?
Yep.
Throw it away, take snapshots, start back up again, whatever.
Yep.
But if it's your machine, that's another risk. But it's the same thing, right? There's risk everywhere. But
yeah, well, and if you do it on a external server, right, you could use a CI/CD pipeline to, when you check in, publish the changes to whatever backend through FTP or something. Yeah.
Here's the thing, John. It depends on where you're at in terms of your development journey and what funds you've got, because all that kind of stuff costs money. It is great to say you got all these free things and I set them up. They soon cost you money. They soon, so if you're trying to get a free solution, that is a great way to get started. Like spin up a VM, pull forward. But it all depends on what you're building there, right? So, all right.
Question number 2, since question number 1 took 7 minutes. If I use an auto keep alive mixin with all of the items in my list, that will keep the state alive. Will this lead to a bigger memory footprint consumption then? So I will sacrifice more memory for performance. I don't know that it's going to affect performance unless you run out of memory, but
I mean, yes. I mean, no, it's not going to affect performance that much in that respect, right? It's more about that
Well, don't do it with 10,000 list items.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's complicated, right? I mean, the whole idea of the keep alive mixing, yes, is to keep the state alive. But I think what there are other options there. Like you can do your own state restoration. You can do things. It would be nice if these things were just baked in. So you just set something to true, as you said, or add another mix, and it just stores your state and then comes back and restores it. And we do have restorable state stuff, but I think that doesn't work for widgets that are just taken off your screen like that, right? That's more about OS state restoration. It'd be interesting. I don't know. So get back to the question, Lucas. You can do that on all your items on your list, but why? Why do you want to keep them alive? For what reason would you want to keep them alive? That's really what it's come into. Why do you think that's an adequate thing to do? Right? You're going to keep 10, basically, as we just said, you get 10,000 items. Suddenly you've got 10,000 potential, you scroll through the list. Imagine like your Twitter home feed or whatever, and you're scrolling, and you kept all that in memory. Soon you run out of memory, your app crashes. Yep. Right? So it's more about understanding your use case and understanding what makes the most sense. For example, you could have your auto keep alive stuff switch out the fact that it's to be kept alive after it gets more than 100 index points away from your current index or something. And you only ever keep 100 on either side, right? Like there's other things you can do to really make it work and be less memory heavy. But yeah, I want to know why do you think you should keep alive all of your items? What are you doing with your items that you expect to keep them alive? Yeah. Maybe the question is why answer is why you're doing that, right?
Right.
No, should I be doing it, right?
Yeah. All right. Thoughts on Android XR and how Flutter can contribute to it? Android XR.
Am I missing something? I'm trying to think of if I've
Yeah,
even heard
I'm
of
wondering
Android
if
XR.
is that augmented reality or what is it?
And learn more about Android XR. Is this? I must have been out of the game because this is on their homepage. Oh, reality expanded. This is
So
AI.
this is the
AI powered
people
operating system coming soon to headsets and glasses. Okay.
Wait a minute. So they're just bringing Dream back, is what they're doing here?
Yeah, but with AI, it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Well,
totally.
here's one of the problems, though. They had a bunch of people who were using Dream. I was one of them. You spent a bunch of money on apps. And then when it changed over to Android 10, they didn't just drop support for Dream. They killed your ability to use it at all. So if you started using Android 10, all those apps you paid money for were dead. And it really left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, including me.
Okay.
So I don't know why we would be ready to jump on that bandwagon again after having things not go well the first time.
I must have been out of the game. I've never even heard of this. I've just been totally so busy recently. Yeah, XR stands for extended reality. It's the umbrella term that encompasses all technologies that blend the real and virtual worlds, including virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. XR is an operating system for extended reality devices that use these technologies like headsets and glasses. It provides a user interface, ability to access popular apps, AI assistance from Gemini to these devices. I mean, the fact is they're calling it Android, so I'm assuming it's based on the Android operating system in some way, shape, or form. It looks to me from my screenshots, it's just Android apps running in this extra shell, basically. So, I mean, they've got OpenXR, WebXR, Android Jetpack XR. So I'm just going to assume that we're gonna see an extended set of APIs that we can just call into, and we can see, are we in XR? How we displayed in XR? What is the angle of our window? The usual things, and we can integrate really well with it. I'm not worried about it. Looks good.
Yeah,
I mean, you said how. Sorry, the question was thoughts about it and how to contribute. We'll contribute it by maybe making a plugin, like grab a VM or whatever they released a VM, and start, build a little team around applying, making plugin for it. It's interesting because we're talking about
Alrighty.
3D. We've got Flutter GPU coming out as well. So actually,
Yeah.
this might be a really good marriage right there of like Flutter GPU and Android XR and really sort of smashing the future, right?
There you go. All right. This one's a little unusual. Is there a roadmap one can use to master how to create custom widgets using render objects? That's kind of very specific.
That's an interesting one. I've not seen anyone. So there are several videos. I wouldn't say roadmap. There's a video series on the main Flutter channel around render objects, and there's been several really good talks that have been done at Flutter conferences like FlutterCon. You go look up. I can give you the link actually. I'll pop in the chat. We have what's it called? Flutter DroidCon content. There we go. So you'll find. I'll post this link in the chat. This is FlutterCon USA. In fact, I'll do the Europe one because I know there's some stuff in the Europe one. But you can actually does both. So this has got 2024. It'd help if I could spoke.
Is that an English version of the word both?
Yeah.
Booth?
I think it's an English version of English.
So you can find the content here. There's also, if you change to the year 2023, you'll find the previous year's FlutterCon EU talks. Have a Google, if you Google search, have a type in the search bar render object or whatever, and I'm sure you'll find some talks. Or just have a
I
look
might
through the
want to
content.
put that up again.
It's in the chat. It's in the chat.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Local storage world feels a bit dry lately. Just moisturizer. Mostly the key value stores. Is Drift the best option right now, or any other suggestions?
I mean, what are you trying to store?
Yeah.
Because I think this is the problem is like if you're trying to store something that's more than key value stores, then for key value pairs, make a file, store it.
Yeah. Get a database.
Yeah, there's like lots of local database solutions. I don't know. I'm not. I mean, what would you say? It feels a bit dry. What are you expecting from it? What are you looking for? Maybe suggest what you're looking for, and then see where we go.
Yeah. Excuse me. Goodness.
We've already got. I see where he's coming from. I mean, like, we've already had some really great solutions, but I think that's it. We've got solutions now, so there isn't a need to innovate. If you think there's some concept that's missing right now, innovate on it, right?
All right. Is there a reason why Flutter left SVG handling to third-party package and made devs create custom implementations to retrieve them remotely? Seems like quite a popular thing to not bother with. Wasn't Dan Field's package made first party?
Well. Okay. So let's clear this up first of all. There's many points to this question, right? So there's many things that Flutter leaves to third-party packages because Flutter is trying to be the framework, the platform. Yeah. It's not trying to be everything for everyone because that would just be not workable, right? They'd have to have people that are experts in SVG and JPEG and then do it all in-house. But for what reason? What are they going to benefit from building an SVG parser into the library, right? Then, okay, you're like, okay, we're just adding an extra format, right? And they use existing libraries when that adds now size to every app that ships. I have an opinion on this, and my personal opinion is they should include SVG, I'll be honest with you, because pretty much every app uses it. The problem here becomes one of compatibility. So SVG has issues, big issues. For example, most people don't realize that SVG supports JavaScript completely out the box. Like their standard, official standard says you support JavaScript. Like we're not going to build it to that standard. Like we're not going to be doing that. So, it was built for SVG as a standard, was built for web. And it's now used as a standard. It's almost like not scalable vector graphic, but standard vector graphic now. Like everything is an SVG that's vector graphics. So I think there's a point there. Is let's say the team implements something and they're like, oh, it doesn't support this one. It doesn't support that new feature. It doesn't support this. And yeah, why are we including that, right? So I can see both sides. devs making custom implementation to retrieve them remotely. Retrieve them remotely is done by the framework. So not necessarily retrieving, it's about passing SVGs and passing SVG standard. And it wasn't necessarily left by third parties because the people that actually built that were working for Flutter team, for the Flutter team at the time, right? So, and because of that, it means it was kind of not third party, second party. It's definitely wasn't officially a Flutter package, but it's also made by people on the Flutter team. So you're getting the best option that's available. You say popular? Yeah, I think you've explained why it's not a good idea to completely include it.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons to both sides, and I think if you have a separate package and it can be iterated on separate. This is the thing. I think there's a common thing that's actually. So I will just explain this. There's a problem that happened with Android back in the day, and that was Android tried to integrate all these widgets and everything into the framework. And then what would happen is there was bugs or manufacturers would add things or change things. And before you know it, the next release would come out, and now that one's outdated. So they came into the problem of how do we get apps using the latest thing, but not the operating system is not, right? And they went, okay, we don't ship it with the operating system anymore. We're not going to ship it. Instead, we ship it as part of the app. And that's where you got suddenly, was it called Android Compat at the time to make backwards compatible changes so you could have the most recent widgets with older operating systems. Then Android X came out, and now it's basically like Flutter. Everything just gets rendered within the app. And this means that the apps carry that with them. Now, this has pros and cons to it, right? This is the con that now apps are a lot larger because now they ship with a lot more stuff in because they have to do a lot more. But the pro is that now they stay up to date, right? Without having to like ship, updates of the platform super regular.
Gotcha.
So I think it's the same thing. It comes to the same thing here. Let's not include lots of stuff in Flutter that can be shipped and bug fixed and managed separately, right?
Yep.
So same for most packages, really. That one in Flutter, right? There's a reason for it.
Okay.
Well, sorry, that was a winded answer, but yeah.
Marco, that one's my fault. I'm sorry I did not see the question. I would definitely have gotten it in the last 10 minutes. And you have my apology on that one.
That's a great question. That is a great question to pose to Jorge when he pops to the stream one day.
Oglethorpe, do you guys know about Flutterfire? Why has it been more than 5 years that it's been waiting for production-ready desktop support and there's no clear roadmap ahead?
Wasn't that a side project? It wasn't like an official. I'm trying to remember now. Oh no! That was the. I don't remember the names of these. Huh.
Wait, isn't it?
Firebase extended
Flutter plugins to connect to your Flutter app to Firebase.
This was just. It is being utilized right now. It is like literally updated last week. What? What are we missing?
Are these two different questions?
Oh, I mean, there's two different questions here. Do you guys know about why has it been so? I think there's 2 points to this. So desktop support. Let's answer desktop support for a second. And they've got a clear roadmap for their stuff for Flutterfire. Yeah. That's the Invitace team. I mentioned that, but the desktop support piece is they're still working on fundamental desktop support. So, for example, there's some actual fundamental things that changed around Flutter. You may not have noticed it, but about how we handle the underlying surface of Windows so that we can do multi-window, and that's coming, right? So this gets us ready for desktop support. So that's one thing just in Flutter. But if you wanted to just use Firebase with a desktop application, well, you can do that right now yourself if you want to. But then what they're doing is they're not officially supporting it, right? Because they have to make a lot of changes their side, right? They would have to have now new people with desktop experience and everything else. Like it's, as we just said, it's not simple. And the team have more priorities that they're going to get more feedback on, right? So it's down to the community to offer that kind of stuff. So there's been a couple of attempts in the community to handle Firebase on desktop. And that started off as recreations of the Firebase SDKs in Dart. and basically making Dart versions. Now, it's a nice thing to do, and especially as a great learning experience for that developer that does that. But fundamentally, it's flawed because you now need to keep that up to date, and you're not part of their team. So as they release new features, now you're always, you're never working with them. You're always trailing that, right? And that's tough. That's a tough place to be in. I've been there in projects before. It's hard. The other side of this is just to take the existing implementations of Firebase and work them into your Flutter app, and that's what they've done, right? So that is having like iOS and Android Flutter wrappers plugins around those existing wrappers. This gets you to where you need to be without having to rewrite everything and maintain a different code base. So when it comes to desktop, the way of doing that for you, if you want to do this, is that Firebase offer a C++ SDK. It does not have all the features of maybe some of the other ones, but that means that you can now run that on desktop. So what you do is you use Flutter FFI, and then you can use the FFI capabilities to call the functions from the C++ library and wrap them in Dart code and call them. But yeah, it's just hard. I guess you need to have experience in that. So it's possible. If you want to do it, you could have done it in 5 years by now, I'm sure. So no clear roadmap. Now you have your roadmap. There you go.
All right.
Also, just to be clear on this point, we do not work for Google. There's all our own opinions, right? So if you want to answer that question, fire it off to a Flutter to a Firebase Devra. See what they come back with. Where's the roadmap? Let's see what happens.
Sadhanshu, I'm sorry, but I think your question's impossible to answer.
Now, without some information about the error,
it's broke. Fix it. That's really what you said. You said it's broken. How do I fix it?
Yeah, we need
no
more
way
info
to know that.
Yeah.
All right. Rendering a list of 10 items.
Wait, what was that question?
No, he said there's an error. How do I fix it? That's all he said.
No, there was something about background color.
He's trying to call a method channel in a background task, and it's giving him an error.
And it's
I can tell him how to fix that. Sorry, I wasn't. I thought you were talking about something else. Sorry. No, bring that back. Where is it?
It's just
gone
answer
now.
the question.
No. Well, so in your background, the things in your background isolate where you've made your entry point, you would have declared that function with like at VM. I can't remember it. But anyway, your entry point for your background operation, you need to call initialize plugins. It's not the main one. It's a separate one. Let me find it. Forget the name of it. I wonder if I can find the. Well, yeah.
Flutter, for me, I'm not sure we're going to have time for code because by the time we get done with just these questions, it's going to be almost 2 hours.
I'll post this link. I literally just Googled this, and I feel like the author of this, Aaron Clark, I might have seen him. Yeah, it's published in the official Flutter. So this was as of 3.7. They added this. Let me bring this up on the stream actually, because I think this is worth just showing people. There we go. Introducing background isolate channels, which is the thing you're missing, and the quick bit of code that they've got in here. This is big enough. Let me make it bigger. Is basically in your root isolate you get your instance token, and then in your background isolate you do this. And what this is doing is initializing the binary messenger, the bit that sends the messages back and forth for the plugins, links it up with the root isolate and everything. So basically, it means you can use plugins in the background. So now here, for example, share preference can be used in the background isolate and not have to be used in the main isolate. And this was an issue for a long time in Flutter, but this is how you solve it. So here's the example of how it works. Blah blah blah. I'm sure you can read it, but yeah, that's the bit you're missing.
Very good.
Have fun.
And watch
Right.
out, because it's different isolate. So if you initialize something in your main isolate, it's not available in
So
that one.
that's a good point, Raf, and I think I want to make that point. So if anyone wants to understand this, you can look up, I think it's called forking, right? But the notion is that everything, all those variables and all those things that you've got in your app, when you create an isolate, you're essentially making an in-memory duplicate of that. So you can actually have the same like global variable set in both things, and then running two different versions of that. The way that you check if you're using the same version of like the exact same instance of a class is you do objects dot identity hash code is the function, and you put your object in that, and you'll get back the hash code that the Dart framework sees as being that object. If the number's the same, it's the same object.
Yeah. So yeah, identity equality there. And you're very welcome. Wow. I'm glad he was able to pull that out there. All right.
Yeah.
Rendering a list of 10 items using list view builder. If I want to update, let's say, the 5th element of the list without rebuilding the whole list, how can I do that? So basically, is looking to edit the 5th item in the list.
Rebuild it.
Let's update
I mean, I think maybe this is
a key.
So the builder returns back a widget, right? That widget can be identified by a key. It could be identified by, like, it could be listening to some sort of state that rebuilds. I mean, maybe it's how you're approaching this, right? If you're doing it from a top-down approach, it's probably wrong. You want the widgets themselves accessing their data, right? So I can imagine this: the parent widget that hosts your list view builder could have a list of value notifiers with the model objects in it, right? And then when the list view builder builds it, it can pass that value notifier over. So that means that if you update the data, that one widget will rebuild. Done, right? That's the kind of thing that you need to do. Like, the widget is monitoring its data. It's observing its data, and when data changes, it rebuilds itself. This way, it's not up to the widget that has the builder in it. It's just any widget in your system will react to the state of the application. That's where your mindset needs to be. Your mindset needs to be in how do I just change the app state and the app just displays that new data. That's how it should always be, right? Now, for most people, the situation you're in right now, I'm just going to rebuild 10 items because rebuilding 10 items is not expensive. If rebuilding 10 items is expensive for you, and not just rebuilding the 1/5 item that changed, then perhaps you've got a bigger problem. There's a judgment call. You can do it, but as I say, it seems like there might be. It's about picking the right time when you want to do that, right?
Yeah. Okay, we're going to cut questions right now because we've been in for 90 minutes and we still have another 7 to go. So we're definitely going to be going over 2 hours.
Let's see if we can get to. Let's speed run it.
Yeah. How can we get more visibility on Dart on the back end? We're doing some really amazing things with Dart backends and FFI to C-based tools, Whisper CPP, FFmpeg, and Llama CPP.
When you say
more
visibility, yeah, do you mean like more visibility for the work you're doing, or more visibility into using Dart on the back end?
Yeah, I was going to say that needs clarification.
If it's the first part, how do you get more visibility about the work you're doing? I'd say write some blog posts for the Medium and submit them to me.
Yeah. John will make sure it gets taken care of. All right. Having an item notifier, offering CRUD operations, and an items provider, how can I keep the entities in sync? For example, items provider fetches them 1 to 10, and item notifier changes item 3 if they're out of sync. Again, I think this comes down to something similar to the item 5 item or item 5 question.
Well, or if you if you're going to change item 3 and notify that it's been changed, wouldn't your provider then reload 1 to 10?
Or another thing, if there is a provider in each item,
Sorry, what was this?
and the thing is, for a provider for each item, you're going to need a different variable for every single one and every single item, which is going to be
Yeah, but
very
this may not
difficult to
be a
set up
traditional-
without reflection.
He just said it's an item notifier offering CRUD operations. So this is not your traditional notifier. This is its own class like notifier, right?
Yeah.
And an items provider, how can I keep the entities in sync? Items provider fetches 1 to 10. Well, but just, I mean, the answer is literally have one registered to listen to the other. You link them up.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you can have this. So there's a couple of different patterns you can do here. You can do like factory constructors that take. So basically, you're required to provide a items provider to an items notifier. So there's an ownership or parent relationship there. So that basically every notifier has to have a provider. So when it changes, it tells the provider that it actually changed. Okay, Riverpod then. Yeah. Well, where's our
That's
Randall?
what I was thinking.
Our Randall's aware at the moment. You can hold on to the question, but it's the same thing. You're doing it's the same thing, right? You in this situation, you would pass them over, and then the ref on the other side would rebuild, right? Set state.
Oh, Randall.
We'll see what happens. Well, oh, there he is. We called Randall's name times in his head.
What was the original question? Because I think that was muddy. That was the problem. I thought it might be Riverpod as well. So if you've got a notifier and it has a provider wrapped around it, as they all do, how can I keep the entities in sync? You make sure that the mutate methods on that item notifier, is both writing the back end and, of course, updating, which means it's going to trigger any subscriber to repopulate as well. That's kind of the normal way notifier and providers work.
Tell you what would be really good, Dennis. Yeah, I tell you what's really good, Dennis. Do yourself a little code example or something like that. Pop it in a gist.
Give us a gist. Give us a gist.
Yeah. Or find Randall and I and others in Discord.
Yeah, go find Randall in Discord and send him the gist. He'll love you for that.
This is also a good one for the Riverpod Discord because a lot more Riverpod smart
if
people
it's
there.
assuming it's Riverpod based, yeah,
definitely. All right, back under my rock.
Right, what's next?
This is an interesting one. How do I get a random list of documents from Firebase? This is the first real head scratcher that I've seen since how would I be able to get pagination to work properly in Firebase?
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Pretty much.
So I mean, look, you can do a couple of neat tricks around this, but this is because what you're using is a document object store. It's not meant for this kind of access, right? I don't know if they've added anything special around random now, but the ways you would achieve this in the classical, what's the best way to put this? The way you would achieve this in very similar words to this is that you would take a list of document IDs, randomize them, and that is now your list of random IDs that you now query for that user. It's pretty jank.
It's another way to hack this is to put all your document IDs in a list and then run a random for the length of the list.
Literally what I just said. You're basically taking the ID, the keys from all of the documents. You should store them in an array for that user, right? Now that can just be locally on the app. It could be in their profile on your Firebase database, wherever. And then you shuffle it, you randomize it. Now you paginate that, right? And then you would have to go fetch those documents.
All right.
Sadly, I would say actually, there's an interesting thing here. Most random is not random, right? So what I mean by that is most things that appear random to a user are not actually we say truly random.
Truly random.
I don't just mean that. I just mean that they're actually done on purpose to be the same. For example, when someone looks through something that's random, you actually only fetch in groups of like 10 at a time, which means you can't have it every single time you call the API be random, right? Otherwise, you're not paid. They can get the same thing in multiple requests that you're sending, right? Because you're doing randomization of the same set. So truly, it's actually about seeding your randomization with pseudo random number, and then that would then seeds the randomness that you're going to see, and you can paginate a shuffled set. And that's how all the SQL stuff works as well.
And then there were 3. Is there a reason List View Builder doesn't have a spacing feature recently brought in 3.27? List View Separated is not efficient as List View Builder, and wrapping elements with padding is okay. Now, my first thought really is that the builder is going to build whatever you tell it. And honestly, I would just start doing this with padding bottom, padding dot only with bottom, and
there's a
way.
trick. Yeah, there's a trick to actually doing spacing on list view correctly, and that is using the padding on the list view itself and the padding on items. Ideally, what you want to do is you split your vertical spacing in half. You put half the top and half the top and half the bottom of your padding, let's say on a vertical list, and then you put the same half and half in the padding of the actual list view itself. This guarantees equal spacing. Whereas if you just put it on the bottom, then the top one's going to be too close to the top edge, and you put on the top one too close to the bottom edge. So, and it also means that when you scroll, you don't get clipped off the edge because your padding is in the right place. If you wrap your list view in padding, that won't work because now you're going to get clipped when you scroll. You want to put it on the list view itself. That's why the padding parameter on the list view exists. There's a reason why it hasn't good because no one added it. No one thought they should have it in there. And to be honest, I don't think it should be in there. It's fine the way it is. As you said, list view separated is not efficient. In fact, it's very efficient. So maybe I'm kind of trying to understand what you're actually trying to achieve with that. There's a different. I mean, it's kind of interesting because this kind of just add padding to your items. I mean, it's not a big deal. It really isn't.
Yeah. All right.
What
is your suggestion on cropping an image in Flutter Web? I always have problems with it. It's slow and buggy when it comes to a high quality image, like more than 3 megabytes.
It'd be the same with any platform. There you go. I mean, the problem is you're now doing. You said 3 meg. I mean, you say more than 3 megabytes. That doesn't tell me much. Like, is that how many? What's the resolution? Because it can be 3 meg compressed. So, right. I want to know. Please post for entertaining. Post the resolution of the type of image you're dealing with. That's what I want to know. Then I'll give you your answer. That really is critical to answering this. Really
not compressed, uncompressed.
No, the resolution, the number of pixels wide.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if it's compressed or uncompressed. The same number of pixels.
All right.
We'll
hang on to that one for a minute.
Yeah, hang on to that one.
Okay. How do you handle streams in a Dart isolate after the app is dead?
Well, the app's terminated. You don't have any isolates. So that's how you deal with it. And maybe you can be a bit more. So I think the point here is explain what you're trying to achieve, and we can tell you how you best achieve it. Right now, you're asking for a solution to the wrong problem.
I have a question. If a isolate is killed off, but the stream is not closed and disposed, is it going to hang out there, or is closing the app going to be enough to kill that off too?
Closing the app kills everything. It's gone.
Okay.
Right. Nothing's going to stay. Isolates are an in-memory concept within Dart itself. So it's like splitting up. It's just like having chunks of memory inside of your one process.
Okay.
and then multiple threads, one thread for each one.
We have a resolution. Wondering why it's slow and buggy to crop. I think that would be slow and buggy to crop in GIMP.
So let me explain the problem you're having for entertaining. The problem you're having, and this is not because of the size of the image. I'm just using that as an example, and I'm going to tell you the numbers here, and you're going to be like, "What?" So the problem here is to crop an image, you're going to need to essentially copy all the data for that image in some fashion and crop it down, right? So you need to uncompress it, manipulate it, and then recompress it, right? That is not a simple process. There's a lot of operations that your computer has to do that kind of thing. This is why we have codecs. Codecs are hardware, a function of your system, which does all this in the actual chip fabric, as it were, right? At the transistor level. This makes it fast. A general purpose computer is great. This is why we have that for general purpose computing, right? For specific tasks, on mass tasks like this, you want to go to a different model. And this is why GPUs exist. So a lot of what you'll see now are two things. If it's to do with compression, decompression goes off to a codec. And if it's to do with cropping or image manipulation, it should be done on the GPU. You do not have access to these attributes inside a web browser. This is your problem. You are doing it in Flutter Web. This whenever you see this kind of thing, it's slow and buggy on a website, or the image is sent to the server, it's processed, and the cropped image is sent back. And then the load is handled by the thing that has all the RAM and all the memory and all the GPUs and everything else, right? So you've got those two options, right? It's that simple, because your browser is a sandbox limited environment. If it doesn't offer image cropping functionality, then it's not going to be posing that stuff to the operating system, to the GPU, right? So that's why. But I do want to just cover something, right? So get this. So this is what you need to put in your mind. This is why image processing is not what you think. It's not about bring the res back up for a second. Cover this. Right. So there's everyone on the stream. This is for everyone on the stream. Right. We're gonna do a little bit of math here. It's really simple, right? So horizontally, we have 8192 pixels, right? And now each pixel is red, green, blue, and possibly alpha, right? If you don't have the red, green, and blue, there's normally like a fourth byte, which is a dead byte, which is just a null value, right? So we times that by 4. So that's 32 kilobytes for one row of data in an image. And now we're going to multiply that by 4159. That's 136 megabytes for the one image. It might have been 3 meg compressed, but when you put it into memory, it's 136 megabytes. Now you go, oh, I might want to do that. I know, I want to do that for every frame of graphics coming from my camera, which is going at 60 FPS. That's 8.1 gigabytes of data in 1 second your phone has to process. It's not happening. It's just not happening, right? Now, the point I'm trying to make here is, let's say, okay, let's just do another bit of math. So it was 8192 times 4159, right? So that's 34 megapixels, that image. There's 34 million pixels to that image. Let's say it takes the computer 10 cycles, that's 10 instructions to decode 1 pixel, right? That's me being quite light and conservative on that right now, right? So we times that by 10. Oh, that's 340 gigahertz or gigaflops of power to just decode the image if you're doing that, right? This is why it just like the numbers, you don't realize how big they add up. You start talking about like power machines. This is one of the reasons why we couldn't do HD graphics on these devices before, because they just weren't powerful enough to do HD graphics. One of the reasons why we have GPUs is to offload all this stuff to a separate processor, so all its gigahertz and power can be just done doing graphics rather than your CPU doing it. So your CPU can do the downloading and the passing of data and displaying of the data, right? So yeah, anyway, my point here is,
unless you're on a Mac,
for the browser. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry. I never miss an opportunity to needle at Mac.
the other side of this is for entertaining. Find yourself some external libraries, right? You might find that someone's got they've done the hard work to make a really efficient and try and get those number of instructions down. JavaScript library or library that's done in WASM, right? And then what you can then do is still use Flutter, but you can then use the JS interop package to actually access that JavaScript, access that WASM code, and actually call out to that code to do the cropping. Shall we have a look at it?
We have a gist.
Let's have a look. With our first gist, why not?
For entertaining, you probably put in a link for the gist and it never showed up for us. But this
is that what you said? I'm getting a 404. Did you delete that? Or did you not make it public? I looked it up. It did resolve, but yeah, apparently it's 404 now. So yeah, let us know.
Mm-hmm. Standing by. So, and that was our last question, which I'm going to need to get going.
I think
so. The gist just has a link in it to a website.
Well, I mean, like, that's one way of doing it, but also the gist doesn't load. It's a 404. You need to make it a public gist, I think. Or maybe just double check it yourself, because that's not loaded for me. Anyway, Nubian image processing. Is there a way I can send operation to GPU and get data back and just render the result? Yes. There you go. You can. In fact, there is an interesting point here. If we're entertaining, I didn't mention this. You might actually get away with using web GPU, but you're going to have to write some mad code. Just saying, you want to get that performance, you can do it. You're just going to be writing some library. So maybe see if you can find like an image cropping package for the web. I'm sure websites have needed this, and someone's gone ahead and made some really efficient library that takes advantage of web GPU, for example. But I don't know. I haven't looked around for one, so I doubt
that's what they're saying. They're saying the website link that they're trying to share is a website that can crop that image in under a second.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sitting here. My first question is, what kind of backend does this website have?
I mean, the website that can crop the image in the buffers, yeah. But
it's running an NVIDIA A100. You know?
I mean, it depends on it depends on what you're processing, how you're processing it. Like, here's the thing, there's so many shortcuts to doing this kind of thing. If you've got a specific image cropping library that's optimized for that one purpose, you can get away with quite a lot. Like, there's ways of decoding JPEG images without decoding blocks, because they come in 8x8 blocks. If you're trying to crop within that bounds, you don't have to decode all this other stuff inside the image, right? There's tons of ways of of taking these things, but now you're building an image cropping library and not an app, right? Yeah. So yeah, the thing you're trying to do is do that, and that's what I'm saying. You should go find a library that does it. Can you post a new gist link? I can't load it, so you need to post a new gist link. It doesn't.
No, he's saying that the other website doesn't use any server. It's only within.
I know that, but I can't look it up and confirm or give him any more information until he posts the link. Posts new gist.
Yeah, and I think he's talking about two different things. He's trying to link the image, but I think he's talking about a completely different web browser, or I'm sorry, website. Okay, the website is I Love Image.
Sure.
So
the fastest free web app for easy image modification. Exactly. They've literally built an entire image modification system.
Yeah.
And they have pricing. This costs money because it spent them a long time to do all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, this is dedicated image processing.
I mean, the whole thing is around this, right?
Once you start getting into this kind of back-end horsepower, we're way beyond Flutter.
Well, yeah, I'm not convinced, but this isn't using something on the server side. They got WordPress plugin. Developers, product for developers. PHP, .NET, Ruby, Node.js, API reference. It's an API. It's a REST API. They do it on the server.
Yep.
Literally, that's what they say. What do you want me to say?
Yeah. So they're using the horsepower of a dedicated machine.
They literally have a crop image API. Width, height, X, Y. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, you're trying to recreate something that they've dedicated an entire machine to.
Yeah.
They literally
No.
have like request workflow, start the process of, upload a file, then you can use one of their features to like crop it or rotate it, whatever you want to do, and then return the result. It's called iloveapi.com. If anyone wants to, I'll put it in the chat. They got like documentate the API reference and then stuff. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, that takes us to 5 minutes less than 2 hours. And with that, unless anyone has anything else, I think we're going to cut it. They love everything. Flutter, for me, you're on a roll today.
The bandwidth must cost a lot. That's why they charge for it. It's a chargeable service. The free stuff. The free stuff is like it's like what we were just saying earlier. The free stuff is to get people on board, get people liking. It's a business idea, right? It's the same thing as why you download an app and you have in-app purchases. You get it for free, but then actually when you want to use it, you pay for it, right? So this is just a standard business practice, right? They offer you an X amount for free. They can cope with those costs of that outlay as their marketing budget. So now they can actually, essentially the people paying for it are paying for the free use, right? They can work out the numbers, make it work. Why not?
Addy,
Also,
we understand you're asking multiple times, but we cut questions off quite a while ago. So anyway, with that.
Should I answer? How long we got? 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Can't. Why not?
Simon's an addict.
I am. What is the best way to get my app updated if any of my Firebase collections gets updated? I wanted the data to get stored in my app local, but my app is terminated. It's called push notifications. You have a cloud function.
That's not going to update for the app, though, is it?
Yeah. So this is the process. You ready for this? Addy, sorry. What you need to do is you have a cloud function that monitors that collection in Firebase. And then inside of that cloud function, it sends a push notification to the user that is subscribed to monitor that collection, if you will. This is up to you to manage that subscription process. Then what's going to happen is when the app receives the data notification in the background, it will start the background message stuff inside of Firebase messaging. And inside that, you can then go fetch the data if you want to go fetch it, because you're limited to like 4K per push message, I think it is. You go fetch the data and update your local database or whatever you want to do, sync your data. And then if you want to, you can then present a notification to the user saying, you've been updated, you've got new data, you've received a new message. So this is the same way that if you've got a messaging app and you received a message, what you kind of do is the message gets added to the database. That triggers a process which sends a push notification to the user. And then the user, it's either a data notification, which means it comes in the background, and then you can then notify the user, or it gets straight to the user and without the app having to process it, which is called a notification. I think standard notification.
All right.
Anyway, there you go.
Very cool. And at that point, I cannot feel my rear end. So I think we need to call it.
So, we're not going to be live coding today, right? I am actually a monitor down. My monitor blew up.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
And then I got the new one, and then the delivery company decided to smash the screen. Wasn't it nice?
Oh.
I'm just having like the best fun time. And then the other monitor I got, I plug it in, it doesn't work. I'm literally having.
Guess you're only supposed to work with one monitor.
So, yeah.
Wow. Just like the rest of us.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
All you plebs.
Yes. All of us ordinary people.
All righty.
Well,
You all have a good week, and we
Yeah.
will see you
too.
in 7 days.
Sounds
that's right.
good.
166 hours. Yes.
Yeah. And Dash and Randall will dance again.
Exactly.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Yep.
Push button.
See you.